Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Coming Attractions organised by the Asian Film Archive. My name is Kiwi.
My name is Viknesh.
Yep, and we are the film programmers working for Asian Film Archive, and we are also here to introduce to everyone again what will be coming up in the month of January and maybe a bit into February as well. And I think we should start off with our regular programs, releases and restored. And I think especially in the month of January, we have a few very exciting, interesting titles to share. So I'll let Vic tell us a bit more about one of them first.
Yeah. So the first film I'm going to talk about is as part of our Restored program. And if you've heard our episode last week or if you've been following our programs, Restored is a regular monthly series that we do of classic Asian cinema. Films that have been meticulously restored by various institutions and archives around the world. So the film that I'm going to be talking about is called Gate of Hell by Teinosuke Kinugasa from 1954. It's a sort of a classic tale based in 12th century Japan. It's about a sort of a very passionate samurai who falls in love with a woman who he finds out is actually already married. So he goes on this sort of very mad rampage to try to win her affection. This is one of those films that was famously known more in the West back in the day than in Japan. Actually, it traveled out and. Reportedly one of the first few Japanese color films to be seen by the West. So actually back in its day, it won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. It even won the top prize at Cannes and Locarno. But, not just about it being appreciated in the West, but it is now part of Japanese canon, considered a very important film. Known very much for its bright color palette, beautiful costumes, very inspired by Japanese theater, kabuki and such. So, that's our first sort of restored film that we're doing for January, and we're very excited to present that.
So next up, we have our new release, which is, of course, a contemporary film that was released in 2020. So this is actually probably the 24th feature film by Korean auteur-director Hong Sang-soo. And this film is called The Woman Who Ran. And it's... to describe this film, we have to talk a bit about Hong Sang-soo's type of cinema. So he has been especially productive in the last decade and averaging more than one film per year. So this latest film is part of this series of collaborations with, you can call his muse, also his real-life romantic partner, Kim Min-hee, and it stars her again, and it's this latest turn in the director's filmography for female-centered stories. So The Woman Who Ran is quite a special one for us because it's, I guess to us as programmers, is seeing director Hong mature into a state where he really centers on multiple female characters. And if I were to describe this film in one line, it would be a woman who actually visits old acquaintances and meets a series of annoying men.
Yeah, the men are pretty annoying in the film.
The men are pretty annoying. So what actually happens, I'm not going to reveal too much, of course, but within those moments of meeting her friends, she also encounters, you could call passive-aggressive males interjecting into those moments. And I think one way to see this is also that the film can be a critique of gender politics, sexual politics in Korea. And of course, this has always been something that is a feature of director Hong's film, and I would say especially so in this title. Yeah. So I definitely recommend this one for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it recently screened at the Singapore International Film Festival.
Yeah, and also it actually won at the Berlin International Film Festival, the 70th, the one in 2020, and won the Golden Bear for the best director at the festival. So again, another award-winning film to showcase in January.
Yeah, and actually most of Hong Sang-soo's films only get screened at festivals and they sort of disappear. So we're very fortunate to be able to give it a space to be seen by more people, 3 or 4 times, maybe even 5. Yeah. Okay, so the last film, last film special, well, of our part of our regular programs that I'm going to talk about for January is another restored film. It's called The Chess Game of the Wind. It's from Iran. It was made in 1976 by a filmmaker called Mohammad Reza Aslani. As it is with all these classic films, there's always like a very interesting story about how they got found, how long they've been lost, and all the efforts that were done to restore them. But the story behind this one is actually quite extraordinary. I mean, it got screened once in 1976 in Tehran at some sort of international film festival back then. It was immediately panned by Iranian critics. Reportedly, people walked out. They boycotted the film, said they needed to be stopped. It subsequently only screened in very small sort of salon screenings. Reportedly, some famous filmmakers such as Satyajit Ray, and people like them actually saw the film early back then, and this was a debut film, and they were really applauding this new filmmaker's work. But also to understand what was going on in Iran at the time, is that there was a tussle between the monarchy, which was sort of carried on as part of the Persian Empire, and there was a growing discontent coming from the Islamic clerics and also the socialist sort of leftist movement that had sort of teamed up together with a student kind of movement as well. This all culminated in 1979, where the Iranian government was taken over by a conservative Islamic regime, basically, and that started to then started a process of cutting back on what was considered westernized liberal values of sorts. And this film essentially got the chop because of that. It was subsequently banned, and no traces of the film were ever to be found. The filmmaker, Mohammad Reza Aslani, had thought that essentially his film was gone and never to be found again. Fast forward to about 45 years later, in 2015, he was just sort of walking down some flea market in Tehran and found the films just lying there. He bought it, and then he shipped it back to Paris, where he's based now. And then they started this process of recuperating the film and basically a hidden gem of world cinema that nobody has ever seen. Then comes in the Film Foundation, which is an organization started by Martin Scorsese that's been restoring and screening old films for about 30 years now. They got involved, brought in a filmmaker and a bunch of other consultants, and they pieced together this film, repaired the damage, and now we get to see it in full sort of digital glory.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, because of the pandemic this year, the film really didn't get a good chance to be featured on the big screen around the world theatrically. So, this film was made available for a while online. I know in different platforms, but this would be really the first time, at least in Singapore, right? Yeah. At least in Singapore, that we will be screening this on the big screen as it should be seen, because, this is such a rare gem, lost and found, and such a fitting film for a film archive like ours to be presenting. Exactly. Yeah, so I would definitely urge people to check this one out, because this is something that you wouldn't find, people can't find for the last decades, and, this will be a rare chance for people to watch it right here at Oldham Theatre.
Yeah, and even though it was made in 1976, you could there's something very modern about it, I would say.
There's also something quite classic, because it's somewhat like a gothic film, or that's how the tone is, but then very modern because of maybe the politics within that.
Yeah, which is kind of what got it banned in the first place, right? I mean, there's a lot of so it's basically it's a gothic thriller based in a family where the matriarch dies, and there's a sort of power struggle between her daughter, who's this disabled woman, and her sort of second husband, and a tussle for wealth and power and money. But yeah, there's some issues of there's obviously some political overtones, which might have been interpreted by the then regime, and also there's some what can be considered transgressive. I won't say any further, but I think we can't recommend this film anymore than what we have already done. Yeah. So those are the films that we are screening for January as part of our Restored and Releases program. Yep. Okay, so for the months of January and February, we are very excited to present what has now kind of become known as a marquee event for Asian Film Archive, State of Motion, which is a sort of multi multi-arts, interdisciplinary event that stretches out for 2 months. And it's going to be part of the Singapore Art Week, and this is our 6th edition. So Kiwi here is a co-curator of this, and previously you've also produced it as well. So he will speak more about what this is about and what this year's edition is about. Yeah,
sure. So, I've been with the project and of course with the institution for some time now, about 6 years, and we started the first edition of the State of Motion series in 2016. It is going to be, 2021 will be our 6th edition, as was mentioned, and I think it really started off because we had National Arts Council. We were the Singapore Art Week team that was interested to collaborate with us, and then we were talking about what forms of collaboration can be done, or what could we speak more about instead of just doing another series of film screenings, right? So I think we spoke about things like visual culture as a collective whole, and also, of course, to talk about filmic research, but then with contemporary arts, and so much video works that are under that banner now. How do we really talk about, the moving images, really, and also a lot of the histories that are really not being interpreted, or the chance for interpretation and for access that we wanted to showcase as well. So I've always seen this series as a way for the archive to open the vaults up in some ways, to invite different collaborators, artists, writers, thinkers, curators to come in and look at what is available and to make use of the material to come up with creative ways to present to the public in fresh perspectives. So I think this is really the gist of what State of Motion was born out of. Yeah.
And this year's edition, there's obviously a new theme that goes along with it. So maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Sure. With every edition of State of Motion, we wanted to tackle or approach different themes, right? So, very broadly speaking, we did classic Malay films of the categories as well as the Shaw Brothers, and of course that comes with its own idea of the Malay verse at the cups of independence of Singapore. So that was one theme. We also had foreign films from late 60s to early 80s coming here to, you could call really appropriate Singapore and look at us through stranger eyes. And we also went through different genres, especially monsters and horror, and opened up to the region because that's such an important motive and folklore about Southeast Asia and how that translates through film and captivates audience with fear and spectacle. And these are just a few things that we've done before. And this upcoming one, we are going to talk a bit about projecting into the future, because the past 5 editions was always somewhat looking back. And this futuristic lens will be what we are adopting with the play on science fiction genre on a very surface level, I guess. Yep.
Right. So sci-fi is the basic kind of...
Sci-fi is the marketing line for people. But of course, it's not going to be just sci-fi. We're talking about, sci-fi has so many elements to it. There is, of course, the entertainment side, but there's also what holds the future, right? And the projections of future, people, how they imagine it. So I believe we're also talking about audiovisual technologies, how that the screen or different mediums and media around the world, the web, on our phones have proliferated our imagination. So that power as well is something that we are very interested to talk about. So we have 2 arms in terms of having the main visual arts exhibition that is very much centered on audiovisual works. So we are also thinking about blurring those lines between what is, filmmakers, artists. They are really all part of this whole fabric of contributing to visual culture, I guess. And then we will still have our so-called standard film program that will be held at Oldham Theatre right here, as well as some special screenings with our venue partner, Marina One. And that will also be where the exhibition will be held.
So you have these two arms. There are also talks that go along with it as well.
That's right.
But yeah, the film program is something that you took charge of, and you kind of put together.
We show support. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Of course.
Yes, we are a team.
Yes, we are a team.
Yeah. So. And this is obviously has resonances with the theme of the entire State of Motion, but also with the artworks as well.
Yes.
But it's also like a self-contained program in that sense that has resonances within its own itself as well. So could you maybe talk us through about how do you come out with the film program and
I think strictly speaking, we are approaching this whole project with multiple universes, and the theme this year is called Alternate Opt Realities. And of course, I mean, as the term suggests, we are talking about different strands of realities. And I think the word opt, OPT, also suggests different permutations or possibilities like optional, optical, and optimal as well. Sorry. So yeah, there are these three different ideas that we are approaching. What can the future be, or what is being reflected now in the present? So back to the film program, we can expect many different universes, but I think the common thread here is that they are all coming from a very local context and perspective. And local is also something that is quite important to us because it's a Southeast Asian type of like programming this time around. So films that come from a Southeast Asia country or coming from a Southeast Asian-based perspective. And we are pushing this in kind of two tracks. So the first track is how some films really replicate certain tropes and certain aesthetics of what we would constitute as the science fiction genre. As we all know, that science fiction genre is really dominated by certain popular cultures around the world. I mean, I can name, of course, America, who's the Hollywood. We also have like European cinema, Metropolis, very famous example. Of course, there is also Japan, who has really captivated so much with their brand of futurism or brand of science fiction. What then about other parts of the world, which also would want to have a stake in what the future is like? So I think this is something that's quite telling in this trend, which is they're trying to replicate these modes of presenting science fiction and creating spectacles, creating entertainment, and you would call it like popular media products in some ways. So that's the first trend. The second trend is something that I would think it's veering towards more contemplative modes of using science fiction ideas and tropes to really talk about maybe more deeper artistic or political ideas. So I think there is a recent trend in the last couple of years or so where what we would call festival or art house directors have been suddenly tackling this genre. So to name a few, we have like people like Lav Diaz from Philippines. We have Matty Du from Laos. We have Trong Minh Ki from Vietnam, and someone like Joseph Anggi Noen as well from Indonesia. So these are like so-called recent festival favorites, and they've started to look at this genre. But how they approach it is really something quite different, because really they're talking back to what the country's really like the hopes, aspirations, concerns in politics are.
So, are there some sort of highlights from the two tracks that you like to talk about?
Yeah. There are a lot, but I'm gonna just distill it to maybe three examples, right? So maybe starting from one that is a bit more, entertaining, so to speak. It's the first Singapore sci-fi film that a lot of people don't know about, and which we are very happy to screen it. So it's a film called Avatar. Not the James Cameron one, but this actually predates the James Cameron one. So it actually has an American title called Cyber Wars, but it's actually directed by local theatre thespian Guo Jianhong, and from the theatre practice. And this is her kind of like dabbling into cinema. So this film is really about this like so-called evil corporation controlled by the rich and powerful, and how there's this like detective theme coming in and trying to solve this like virus, I think, that is going through the city. So I think that's something that, at least for historical purposes, it's made in 2000, it's released in 2004. So it's also, of course, of a certain time in terms of aesthetics. But I think it's important to see the first Singapore sci-fi film, how that's being, the lens that has adopted. Yep.
We can expect to see some local celebrities in it. Right?
Yes, local celebrities. I forgot to mention them. So local celebrities like Lim Kay-siu.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And yeah, you just come and find out there'll be more. But there's also people like international stars like Joan Chen, as well as David Warner. Yep, if you guys know these people. So yep, this film has not been seen a lot before. We've recently got the tapes to digitize it, so it will be quite high resolution, and hopefully people can see it in fresh eyes. Yep, this time around.
Great.
Yep.
I think it is one of those films that kind of went under the radar, and even if you talk to people about it, they may not have seen it or heard of it.
To be very honest, like I didn't know about this film until like maybe in the last year or so.
Yeah.
Yep. Until like had to do some research, and this this hidden gem was suddenly like found out, and it had a limited release in Singapore, like theatrical release, but really no one knew about it, and I think it went to like a straight to DVD type. But yeah, this time around we had the blessings of the director, so we're very proud to maybe have her as well to after like how many years, 16 years, to maybe revisit this film.
In a future war, the line will be crossed between the real and the unimaginable.
I've come to play, my dear girl. You don't have the qualifications to play.
You defy the police directive.
The game never ends.
Now let's peek behind the curtain.
How does it work?
What am I thinking?
Time to dance, Slim!
Metastasized into nearly every organ in my body.
You've let a mouse into our house. Nobody wins. What kind of game is that?
There's chaos and order. They'll never let you out.
Game over.
Yeah, so I'll talk about another recommendation this time around. So maybe what I'm doing is I'm veering more from the entertaining films, not so but more so-called mainstream popular films to somewhere that is a bit in the middle. It's called The Long Walk. So this is actually directed by Laotian director Matty Du. So she's famous for making like the first horror film in Laos, or first feature film as well. And then this is like her third feature film that goes into a bit of this science fiction genre parts. Yep. So it's kind of like a indigenous mix of lo-fi science fiction and melancholy ghost story. And it's about time traveling. It's about this old man that wanted to right some wrongs 50 years later. So he actually time travels through the assistance of a ghost to kind of save someone that's dear to him. So this is kind of like the story plot. I think what is most interesting is that it is set in the future. There are like certain technologies that you can see, like drones and those like gear that we are so used to seeing in this type of genre, but it's still in some type of a village setting. So that's also another like way to see how progress can be made or not been made in certain countries. And technologies become also very invasive in this sense. So this is how I think the filmmaker very cleverly melds everything together in a mix of genre, and I'm sure you'll be entertained, but there are also moments of contemplation for everyone with this very special film that will be doing its Singapore premiere with us.
Yeah, and I think Matty Du is quite a fascinating filmmaker in her own right. In a sense that she's Southeast Asian, but she grew up in the US, and she works frequently with her partner Chris, who does her who writes her screenplays for her, who's also American. So you do see this fusion of American genre, Hollywood genre tropes that they are clearly very well versed in, and yet there is this sensibility that is steeped in folklore and myth, and ghosts and stories,
and also basically very Southeast Asian, or maybe more specifically very Laotian. Like all these unique features are the fusion of like American popular cinema with science fiction and horror and this local context coming together. So I think that is one of the real interest selling points for our audience, and I will encourage again people to check it out.
มึงเป็นไผเขามาเพื่อนกูยังบ้าแม่มึงอยากกินข้าวกูบ่
ขอโทษอ้ายก็ขึ้นเคลื่อนพิษ
มีอย่างวะ
อยู่หั่นแหละมึงต้องออกมาดอกอัดตัวดีๆกันนะแนวหน้าอยู่วะมึงจะกลับมาอีกเด้อจับกูได้เถอะนะลากคอมึงให้ตำรวจรถขึ้นมาอีกจับได้เถอะนะกูส่งให้ในบ้าน
I think the last recommendation I have, it's maybe veering more towards video artworks or video art installations. But this particular film is meant for film screenings. So this is done by artist Lawrence Lake, who is a UK-based Malaysian Chinese artist by descent. And this film will be making its Southeast Asian premiere with us, and it's called Idol. But the Idol is spelled as AIDOL, if you get the pun. Yeah. So Idol is actually a so-called a loose story about a computer-generated fantasy world set during the 2065 esports Olympics. So it actually has a central character that came from his previous film called Geomancer in 2017, which we're also screening as a double bill together. And it's really talking about different ideas of like human versus artificial intelligence, power of mega corporations, and the value of creativity in a gamic setting. So this Idol, it's almost like a framing like an idol reality show, a singing competition, and then you just see like how contemporary popular culture is also being filtered through within this whole work.
I mean, Lawrence Lake is I saw Idol in London in last year in a gallery setting, and I think it was just sort of on loop. So there's something quite interesting about presenting it in a cinema where you have to come in and watch it from start to finish. What are your thoughts about sort of the two spaces that a film like this gets screened in? Like a white cube gallery space and what essentially is a cinema space.
I think maybe the main difference that how we're presenting it is, firstly, again, it's a double bill, so people can actually get to see threads coming from his previous film. Characters also, like knowing the personality of the Geomancer character, which is actually this like roving satellite that gone rogue, and then how this satellite actually traverses into this new film. So there are these connective threads that people can enjoy. As also, I think it's also about retention in between these two spaces. So when you're in a cinema like that, people get immersed in this myth-making, spectacular fiction, and I think at least in this form, it gets people really sucked into the world. And I know for a fact that Lawrence wanted this film, Idol, to also go through the film circuit. So it was screened at the Rotterdam International Film Festival, as well as the one that you saw in London in an exhibitionary form in a white cube space. But yeah, I think this is what my thoughts are about retention and immersion that we can allow with connective threads of characters and plots.
Great. So thanks KV for talking through.
Thanks Viknesh for asking me questions.
Talking through the program and
当心你的粉丝 Diva， 有一天他们需要你，接着他们会删除你。
还有些时间完成这首歌，难道你不想永远活着吗？
永垂不朽，我不想，这不是困扰我的问题。我们的世界已经由外转向里，机器学习只导致了通用的规则。这是人工智能的真正遗产吗？在没有建筑师的情况下生成建筑，没有音乐家的音乐，没有影响者的影响。
在40年代的时候 Temple 真的很活跃，我每晚都去，我在那儿 遇到了所有的明星、制片人和设计师。这是我全部的生命。
So yeah, that was our film trailer for the State of Motion 2021 Alternate Ops Realities film program. And just to share with everyone, the information and all the details will be available on our website at stateofmotion.sg. The exhibition and film screenings will begin from late January all the way to 21st February. So please come visit us, check it out, and hope you can like enjoy the different strands of like futures and future imaginations that we've prepared for you guys. Yeah.
And now that we've kind of spoken about our releases, Restored, and also the State of Motion film program, if you're watching this now, tickets are already on sale. And in fact, some of you might have already watched some films, and if you have, watch more. So go to our website, buy your tickets, and we'll see you at the next episode, where we'll be talking more about State of Motion and also some new films that we'll be screening as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or new or old films if they're restored, right? So I think like lastly, of course, we'll like to thank Singapore Community Radio again for giving us this platform, and check them out on like all their platforms on Spotify, YouTube, and Twitch. I think that's about it. So thank you everyone, and see you at the next episode.
See you in the next one.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.